Hey, it's Dr. Kevin, and in this video, I'm going to tell you all about the best diet for depression. So, if you're struggling with depression symptoms, if you have chronic depression, if you have major depressive disorder, if you've been dealing with any sort of depression for any period of time, you should focus on your diet because guess what? You can control that. You can't control if medication works for you or not. That's kind of trial and error, and there's side effects associated with it. Now, I'm not down or against counseling and coaching. In fact, I love the term coaching versus therapy, even though cognitive behavioral therapy works very well for depression and those struggling with it. But when it comes to chronic symptoms, unfortunately, a lot of people that have depression fall between the cracks because there are not many doctors looking at really the causation of depression, right? They just ask you a bunch of questions. Have you been feeling sad? Have you been feeling essentially lonely? Do you feel lost? On and on and on, and then they give you a pill and out the door you go. That's most cases. So no one's digging deep. And what diet does is it gets down to your biology. Okay, so what that means is it controls essentially your GI function, your gut, which actually has a major impact on your brain and inflammation. If you have a cleaner diet, you're going to feel better no matter what, and you're going to look better too. You'll have more energy. Lots of good stuff from following the right diet. But what is the right diet to follow? Let's get to it. Let's talk about these diets. Number one, Mediterranean. Lots of research on Mediterranean diet with many different types of conditions. It could be cognitive decline, could be heart disease and diabetes. There's lots of supported research behind the Mediterranean diet for many types of conditions and diseases, including depression. So what is the Mediterranean diet all about? Well, essentially, it's getting away from what we eat here in America, which is the standard American diet. A lot of processed foods, a lot of red meat, a lot of sugars and dairy products. So with the Mediterranean diet, you can't eat any of that. So it's mainly focused on eating more fish, lots of olive oil, lots of vegetables and fruits, dairy products in a minimal amount, and of course, legumes, etc. So that is the Mediterranean diet. Again, good research behind it, solid diet to follow. Can't go wrong. In fact, with any of these diets, you probably have some level of success, but there is one that I'm going to cover before this video is over that I think is the best diet for someone with depression. Let's go on to number two, paleo diet. The paleo diet is fantastic and it's got a lot of support behind it for those with autoimmune conditions like MS, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, type 1 diabetes, and on. So what the paleo diet does is it gives you a little bit more energy, which is great, especially if you struggle with depression, if you are fatigued, and it improves your overall lifestyle. You just feel better all over. So lots of support behind that. So what is it all about? How would you follow, or what foods are included in a Paleolithic diet? Well, just think about it. Paleolithic, we're going back thousands of years. What did people eat? They ate meat. So think meat and fish primarily. Now, what it does exclude out of this diet does exclude legumes and typically tubers because thousands of years ago, people weren't eating these sorts of things. So you're going to focus on meat and some fish. You're going to focus on vegetables. You're going to focus on fruits, some nuts, but it's actually some nuts are like a peanut is actually considered a legume, so you have to be careful there. And again, removing some of those things that they didn't eat thousands of years ago, which includes grains as well. Okay, so that's a Paleolithic diet. FODMAP. What the heck is a FODMAP diet? So I'm going to tell you. Thanks for asking. So this stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. All this means is these are types of sugars. Now, there's a lot of support behind a low FODMAP diet with those with IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. And there's a connection between IBS and those with depressive symptoms or mental health issues. Because if you can fix your gut, you're going to fix your brain and the way you feel mentally and emotionally day in and day out. So what is this type of diet like? Well, believe it or not, some healthy foods need to be removed. So for instance, if you eat things like certain fruits, apples, pears, or peaches, those are a no-no in this diet. Even certain healthy vegetables like onions, asparagus, leeks, that's a no-no in this type of diet. So essentially it's going to be fermentable foods as well. So think about some of those fermentable foods that you commonly may see on the shelf in a grocery store. Pickles, olives, sauerkraut, yogurts, things of that nature, yeast products that essentially are going to produce maybe a lot of gas and discomfort in the GI tract. It's also very helpful for those with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So essentially, that is a low FODMAP diet, okay? Keto, have you heard all the rave about the keto diet? Essentially, this is an extremely high-fat diet. Now, the keto diet is one diet that goes back essentially 100 years with lots of great science behind it. And essentially, this diet was developed for those individuals, actually for kids with epilepsy. So if they were having seizures, the way they stop seizures is to stop eating. But then they said, hey, we have to feed these kids, otherwise they're going to die. So they started feeding them food, but they eliminated essentially anything that contained sugars or carbohydrates, fed them high-fat diets, and lo and behold, to this day, it's extremely successful for people with epilepsy. But it also has a number of different functions that can help people. Now we're seeing some research coming out with cognitive decline, dementia, brain tumors, mental health issues like being bipolar, schizophrenia. Here's the thing with keto. It's very restrictive, hard to follow, and if you are going to follow it, you should be measuring what we call blood ketones. So you should be taking a blood test on a daily basis to make sure you're in a specific zone, you're not getting too much carbs into your diet and producing sugars in the system. So essentially when you eat high-fat diet, it could be healthy. It could be eating lots of avocados and pasture-raised eggs, fattier cuts of fish, certain vegetables, and using olive oil on your vegetables, just staying away from a lot of carbs. So primarily about 80% fat, certain amount of protein, about 20 to 30% carbs, very, very low. And what happens is when you eat the fat, the body produces energy out of that for your brain and body. The liver does that with that fat. So great diet. It is restrictive. It's very restrictive for those that have medical conditions that I talked about that benefit from this. It is a foundational and a phenomenal diet for those people. Long-term side effects, though, do occur when following a keto diet, so you have to be cautious. In fact, you should check in with your doc if you decide to follow any of these diets. Just a heads up. So the carnivore, which is essentially an all-meat diet, or if we're going to say carnivore/meat diet, a colleague of mine, Paul Saladino, the Carnivore MD, actually he created a book, a publication on this a couple years back, and he had some success in it, but then he modified it. He essentially was eating all meat, fattier cuts of meat. These were healthy cuts of meat that were grass-fed, they were organic in nature. Also eating organ meats, because organ meats are very healthy for you. Now, not a lot of people like to eat organ meats, but there's lots of nutrients, especially in the liver, in the heart, etc. But a lot of people don't like to eat that. Anyway, Dr. Saladino actually ran into some problems and noticed some issues with his testing, blood testing, especially the thyroid hormone started to come down because he wasn't eating carbs. So then he added back in certain fruits into his diet, like honey, pineapple, bananas, avocados, etc. So you can follow an all carnivore diet for a period of time, but it's very restrictive, difficult to follow, or a /meat diet where you're incorporating some fruits. Again, very restrictive. Last diet, the elimination diet. This is a diet in which you would go on for a certain period of time, let's say 30 days. You would eliminate any reactive food. So again, it's very restrictive in its initial stages. But what this type of diet does for you, after your immune system calms down, after you take these foods out of your diet that are reactive, you start to feel really good. And then what you do is you add one food back in at a time to see if you are reacting to that food. Now you may be asking, hey, why can't we just do a blood test on this? Well, unfortunately, the blood tests are inconclusive and they cost mucho dinero. So if you want to spend the money, go ahead and do that, and you can find out what you may be sensitive to when it comes to your foods, but it's not certain. And the body always does not lie when it comes to symptoms. So again, difficult to follow at the beginning, but it really helps you identify which foods are going to be right for you as an individual genetically. So out of all these diets, which one's the best? As I'd mentioned, you may receive benefits from all of them, right? From the Mediterranean diet, paleo, FODMAP. When you get down here, these become a little bit more restrictive long term, so they're hard to stick with, right? This is not as restrictive, and it does have good support and evidence behind it. When it comes to low FODMAP, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, this becomes difficult to follow. I do love a paleo diet if you have an autoimmune condition. But it doesn't help you identify which foods are right for you. The only diet that will determine which foods are specifically right for you is the elimination diet, and that's why I love it. I think it's one of the best diets to follow, because guess what? You don't have to follow it forever. There's the initial stage, about 30 days, where you eliminate all the bad stuff. You start to feel great. But here's the thing, you can't, after you start to feel really good, you lose some weight, great energy, mental acuity, your mood is phenomenal, you can't just go back to the way you were eating. You have to really dial in and know how to determine which foods are causing reactions for you, and then keep them out of your diet for at least 6 months, and then try reintroducing them. So there you have it, the best diet for depression, I believe, according to research, meta-analysis, is an elimination diet. So give it a go. If you need help with the elimination diet, or if you need guidance, just go to my website, kevindobrinsky.com. I typically have a free download on diet there for you, or a blueprint to help guide you along the way. If you have questions, comments, put them down below the video so I can help you from there. Remember, stay subscribed to here. Please like this video, share it if you will. And until I see you next time, I'm Dr. Kevin. Until I do see you then, I want you to eat well and be well.